Welcome to OFA's statewide Day of Action. I'm Jill Mitchler, a volunteer with OFA Fox Cities, Organizing for Action. I want to thank our distinguished speakers and all of you great participants for coming out today. Along with many other people from rallies being conducted in Milwaukee, Madison, and Dodgeville, we want to show our support for the Clean Power Plan and call on our legislators to act on climate change. The combustion of fossil fuels like coal creates a greenhouse gas called carbon dioxide. Greenhouse gases allow for light energy from the sun to come into the Earth's atmosphere, but don't allow all the heat energy to get out. It works just like a greenhouse. And that is why our planet's temperatures are rising steadily. The Green Power Plan finally puts an end to unlimited carbon emissions from power plants and our country's #1 source of climate-destroying carbon pollution. It sets customized state limits and targets that add up to over 30% reduction in carbon pollution by 2030. Over the next 15 years, each state is allowed time and flexibility to achieve its individual goals in ways that work best for their own communities, including expanding renewable energy like wind and solar power. Numerous reports have found that the Clean Power Plan can be met affordably and reliably. So it's a great opportunity to act on climate change. Yes! We are already hearing arguments against the Clean Power Plan. As President Obama reminded us when he first announced this plan exactly 1 month ago today, we must remember our history. We've faced difficult environmental issues before. And even though we got the same old scary, job-killing, and cost-raising stories, we fixed problems like acid rain, LA smog, leaded gasoline, CFCs in aerosol sprays, and cancer-causing chemicals in plastics. New technologies, retooling, new solutions, and ingenuity all helped us figure it out. We can address climate change, and we must act on climate change for us and our future generations. Yay! Now I would like to introduce Patricia Finderstone, who is a registered nurse and a community activist representing the League of Women Voters of the Greater Green Bay Area.
Good afternoon. As stated, I am representing the League of Women Voters today. The League has always had a strong stance for good government. We are a nonpartisan organization, and we are issue-oriented. The League of Women Voters has been at the forefront of the environmental protection movement for decades, supporting legislation to preserve our nation's natural resources and to protect our public health. We base our positions on extensive study and discussion, and one of our top issues is a Clean Power Plan recently introduced by President Obama, and we thank him for that. America's leadership is a key in addressing climate change, one of the most serious threats facing our nation and our planet today. As we face challenges to our environment and to our health, and to the economy of the nation, we will expect Congress to enact meaningful and comprehensive climate and energy legislation that includes an enforceable economy-wide limit to carbon pollution and to speed our country's transition to a clean energy economy. Page 2. And we will expect our state to develop and implement plans that will demonstrate energy efficiency and sound investment in clean energy technologies. And that means that we need prompt and aggressive action to cut the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions from power plants and oil refineries, the two key sources of global warming pollution. When the new rules are finally implemented, they are expected to cut carbon pollution from the power sector 33% below 2015 levels by 2030. And as we improve the environment, so too will public health improve. I think we're all aware that those of us, or those who question whether or not climate change is occurring and have actually limited and prohibited discussion, we know that that's not how an informed democracy should evolve. Good discussion is important to address relevant policies because science is not here to cherry pick. 97% of climate scientists agree that climate change over the last 100 years is very likely due to human activity, and that's from the latest report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And that's a panel of 1,250 international climate experts approved by every major government in the world. We do need to keep in mind that many of those who reject the views of the overwhelming majority of scientists make much of their money in the fossil fuel industry. Now, I am not a nurse. Yes, I am a nurse. Yes, I am a nurse, but I am not a climate scientist. Goodness. But I'm very much aware that climate change already has a significant negative impact on human health. And that understanding is the basis of my active and aggressive engagement in how we must respond to climate change at once. The signals about what human activities are doing to the environment seem clearer as each day passes. The natural disasters, the floods and the droughts and the forest fires and the lost livelihoods and the destroyed infrastructures and the devastation to so many people around the world. There's no doubt in my mind that climate change is the defining issue for the 21st century. It is absolutely critical public health priority and a moral responsibility for each of us to learn about its impact upon us. It affects the social and environmental determinants of health, the air we breathe and the water we drink and the food we eat, and the changes that come about in the reach of tropical diseases, and so on. The cost of climate change often doesn't address the needs of socially vulnerable communities. A healthful environment should be a basic right. So let's lead the world in reversing climate change. Let's make sure our planet is habitable for our kids and our grandkids. Let's transform our energy systems away from fossil fuels and into energy efficiencies and sustainable energies that will not only protect our health and our environment, but will also create good-paying jobs. And let's fight off attacks from big polluters and their allies in Congress. Let's encourage our state and local leaders to work to ensure the plan is fully implemented properly in our communities. In closing, our League supports legislation that seeks to protect our country from the physical, economic, and public health effects of climate change, while also providing pathways to economic prosperity. Martin Luther King once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." We cannot remain silent about climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate this. Thank you. Thank you, Pat, for your inspiring comments about recognizing that the climate is changing, and our actions and expectations of Congress and our state legislators to do something about it. Our next speaker is Reverend Marion E. Boyle, pastor at Westside Moravian Church and part of the leadership team of Joshua, an interfaith social justice organization.
One of the core values of the congregation I serve is, simply put, care for others. And this might sound like a simple, easy thing, something assumed for people of faith and people of goodwill to do. However, it is not so easy to really live out this value. It demands our time, our attention to what is happening to the people in our communities, to the home and the environment we share. What does it mean to care for others, to care for creation? For us as people of faith, it means to care for others as God cares for them. We look to a God who creates all that is and values the human dignity and worth of all, and we are to follow suit. We look to a God who redeems, saves what is broken and hurt in our world, and calls us to enter into that same work. We look to a Holy Spirit that guides willing hearts to live in ways that are respectful of all creation and to be a source of help and healing. Scripture from Psalm 8 verse 6 shares words that have been misused and abused, saying of God, "You have given humans dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet." Dominion is not domination. Dominion is caring for others the way God cares for them. This land, this water, this air is not ours. It's given by God for the common good of all. Dominion suggests we have an incredible responsibility to live well in this land and live well and rightly and justly with each other. This is affirmed by the teachings of my tradition in the Moravian Church, our hymns, our liturgies that remind people of faith about our collective and individual responsibility to be faithful stewards of all God has entrusted to our care and seek what is best for all. Several years ago, our congregation took another look at creation care, and we explored installing solar panels for electric power. The financial cost was high for our small church, but doing what is right is not always economically rewarding. We knew the significant issues with air quality in Northeast Wisconsin and its effect on us, people with poor health, and future generations. And we hoped that even our small effort could make an impact and could help. In this, in so many other ways, we seek to live out our faith that reflects how we do care for God's creation. We care about our role, our responsibility in creating these situations, the problems, the brokenness that we have contributed to, our own actions that have soured the air, polluted waterways, and damaged lands. We confess our behaviors that have hurt and our own apathy and willingness to look the other way and commit to change. We care about those most vulnerable, the sick and ill who are burdened by the world as it is, and those with little power to affect change and share their voice, children, future generations who must live with the consequences of our actions. And we're grateful that our voice is not a lone voice. It's heartening to hear of Pope Francis's recent statements about the moral responsibility to care for the earth. He explains, whether believers or not, we are agreed that the earth is essentially a shared inheritance whose fruits are meant to benefit everyone. For believers, this becomes a question of fidelity to the Creator, since God created the world for everyone. Hence, every ecological approach needs to incorporate a social perspective, which takes into account the fundamental rights of the poor and the underprivileged. The Christian tradition has never recognized the right of private property as absolute and inviolable, and has stressed the social purpose of all forms of private property. The care of creation for the common good is a shared value, transcends any one denomination or faith tradition. It's a value that is vital for our life in this common home we share. Here in Northeast Wisconsin, as people of faith and goodwill, we can put our values into action, asking for industries and power plants to care for the good of all people in the common home we share, seeking new ways to do business that cares for the health of all and generations yet to come. So let us be responsible. Let us care deeply for the resources entrusted to our hands, this common home we share together. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Boyle. Your message from the faith community rings true for every human being because of the morality of this issue. I would now like to introduce Alan Lawrence, chairperson of the Sierra Club, Fox Valley Group.
Thank you. Sierra Club is the nation's oldest, largest, and most influential grassroots environmental organization. It was founded in 1882 by John Muir, a resident of Wisconsin as a teenager. The organization claims 2.4 million members and supporters. I am a Sierra Club member and leader, and today I speak as a concerned citizen. Fossil fuels are problematic since they add new carbon dioxide to the previously balanced system. This CO2 has been locked up for millions of years and now floods into our environment, raising our atmospheric concentrations of CO2 to levels not seen since long before the dawn of the human species or their ancestors. I want to tell you that President Obama's proposal has been a very long time coming, a fact that has been frustrating. Last September, 400,000 people from around the country and around the planet gathered in New York City for the world's largest ever climate march. My wife and I were thrilled to be part of that march in Manhattan. Many thousands more people participated in 2,800 other rallies in 166 countries. Remarkably, this event got poor media coverage in our country, but the world noticed and President Obama noticed. 2 days later, speaking at the UN summit, Obama warned starkly that the globe's climate is changing faster than efforts to address it. Nobody gets a pass, he declared. The alarm bells keep ringing. Our citizens keep marching. We can't pretend we can't hear them. 8 months earlier, in the 2014 State of the Union, President Obama said, "The debate is settled. Climate change is a fact. When our children's children look us in the eye and ask if we did all we could to leave them a safer, more stable world with new energy sources, I want to be able to say, yes, we did." While many of the 400,000 marchers focused on the environment, there was a very strong emphasis placed on the fact that the effects of climate change will be hardest on those least able to cope with it. The poor and marginalized will suffer most. Climate change is not just an environmental issue, it is a social justice issue. The Pentagon and the CIA have released a number of threat assessments in recent years identifying climate change as the greatest threat to our national security. The things that drive conflict are sensitive to climate. Climate change could lead to wars and waves of mass migration. So what are we up against? There is a lot of work to be done. Some of it is difficult and expensive. Some of it is very affordable and common sense. And some of it makes great sense with excellent financial return. But the hurdles we face, the hardest hurdles, are the climate deniers. They have been able to thwart public policy discussions and actions, but that's changing. Last June, Pope Francis released an unprecedented call to action on climate change. His encyclical cast climate action as a moral imperative. He said it represents one of the principal challenges facing humanity, and he chastised powerful institutions and developed countries, arguing that they were not doing enough to tackle climate change. 1 month ago, today, President Obama unveiled his Clean Power Plan to reduce greenhouse emissions from the nation's power plants. We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it, he said. Climate change is not a problem for another generation, not anymore. Power plants are the single biggest source of harmful carbon pollution that contributes to climate change, Obama said, until now. There have been no federal limits to the amount of carbon pollution plants dump in the air. And this week, in Alaska, Obama said, "The time to heed the cynics and critics and the deniers has passed." On this issue, of all issues, there is such a thing as being too late, and that moment is almost upon us. I am supportive of President Obama's recent Clean Power Plan. It is a moral imperative that we must do for ourselves, for our children, for future generations, and for all species. We cannot ignore the problem. Thank you.
Great speech, Alan. Thank you. It's so important for us to remember that our nation's security, our safety, is at risk with climate change. Our last speaker is Congressman Steve Kagan, MD.
Thank you. Yes. Well, thank you very much, Jill, for inviting me, and thank you very much for all of your hard work for organizing people. It's hard to get people away from work in the middle of the day to come out, but this is such an important issue about not just cleaning up our power plants, but about having clean water and clean air. And we're very fortunate to know that here in Wisconsin, we really do believe that it's a very small world after all. There's a song somewhere about that. It is a small world. We like to say in the allergy world, I'm an allergy and asthma specialist. I've been studying the air here in northeast Wisconsin for the past 3 decades, and the air is different. We have a lot more weed pollen than before because carbon dioxide levels have gone up, and that's a very stimulant growth factor for weeds. So thank you to the coal plant behind me for keeping me busy with all the weeds. We live in a small world, and we're really all connected. We like to say that if a tall man in China sneezes today, you get it in the back of your head here in northeast Wisconsin. China has sacrificed their environment for economic development. 95% of the people in China breathe dirty air, carcinogens are in their water, and they're not going to live as long as we will or as healthy. If you don't believe that the weather can make you sick, you haven't gone to a football game anywhere in this region. The weather does affect your health. As a physician, I see it every day. We are all connected. One of our Supreme Court justices once said, when commenting upon a person who was in a bar fight, he said to the gentleman, "Sir, your freedom to swing ends where the other person's chin begins." In that same way, we said that to our neighbor to the north, Canada. A few decades ago, we had a great problem with acid rain. The leaves were falling off the trees because of the acidic concentration of sulfur dioxide emitted from paper-making plants in Canada. That was a problem, and we solved the problem. We solved it first by recognizing what the problem was, doing some studies, and our engineers solved the problem. We don't have acid rain here anymore. We're standing here where I met with the chairman of transportation, the late James Oberstar from Minnesota, who helped me bring in millions of dollars to clean up the PCBs in the Fox River. We saw the problem, good government led the way, we funded it, and that problem will now be no longer with us. So here in Wisconsin, as has been pointed out, we're the home of the ecology movement from the 1970s and even before that. Aldo Leopold, John Muir, and who can forget Gaylord Nelson, who gave us Earth Day. Wisconsin has always led the way. We took action. When I was in office, we had to reauthorize the Clean Air Act. Now, who amongst us is against clean air? Anybody? What about clean water? And what about clean power? There is a fact that is undeniable. There's absolutely nothing clean about coal. It's dirty when it's mined. It's dirty and pollutes the air as it's transported in the trains. It's dirty when it's burned and giving us electricity that gives us dirty energy. We need a clean power plan, and we need our state of Wisconsin to participate with our EPA in Washington. The other fact that's undeniable, there is nothing clean about coal. Climate change is real. It's with us. We have to act now. We have to act together. we're really all in this together. And if you don't believe that prevention is important, well, then forget about everything you've learned in grade school, in junior high school. Forget everything your parents told you about washing your hands before you eat or brushing your teeth. Prevention is a very powerful tool. By cleaning up our atmosphere, by decreasing by 30% the level of carbon dioxide produced by fossil fuels, we'll make it a healthier planet for everyone here and in the future. Thank you for all that you're doing, and let's clean it up.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you. Thanks, Congressman Dr. Kagan, for outlining the physical and personal effects of climate change and the opportunities that the Clean Power Plan offers us to become a healthier people. Indeed, the Clean Power Plan presents us with many great opportunities. With it comes cleaner and more diverse energy supplies, cleaner air and better health, slowing and hopefully reversing climate change with its many terrifying effects, momentum toward the upcoming international climate talks in Paris, lower net energy costs, an increase of tens of thousands of new energy jobs, and according to a detailed analysis by the EPA, a net economic benefit of $26 to $45 billion in the year 2030. Over the past few years, many states have already made good progress in cutting their power sector carbon emissions, but Wisconsin is behind. Slow to embrace the inevitable transition to clean, low-cost wind power, we've missed huge job growth in renewable energy. Wisconsin hasn't seen a new wind energy project built since 2011. Our wind power businesses have been pushed to neighboring states. For example, Minnesota and Iowa have 21,000 jobs in the wind turbine industry, where we have had no growth. And Wisconsin has the highest energy rates in the Midwest, making our state less competitive in the business market. Our current administration policies recently cut the state DNR staff by 31%, and our state has even joined a lawsuit against the EPA's new standards. These policies make it very hard to act on climate change. Now, many lawmakers do not think people care about developing cleaner energy. They won't act until they believe that we think that this is important. It's important. We care. That's why we are here and why we need to keep standing up and raising our voices to support clean energy initiatives like the Clean Power Plan. We need to act on climate change. 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 Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you.